Something I never thought I'd say. Dabo Swinney is the hero we need in college football. A wild, wild turn of events involving Ole Miss, tampering, NIL, and South Carolina's biggest rival. Who's right, who's wrong? Plus a big, big win, top 5 win for women's basketball, and a little bit of baseball action as well. Locked On Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? I am Chris Marler, the host of Locked On Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in America. And we have you to thank for that, and we have FanDuel to thank for our show today. I just changed up the set in the background. That'll really do a lot. Moving the hat 3 inches. We have a great show for you today. It's brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Remember, it's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. I'm filming this right now on Sunday afternoons in between the AFC and NFC Championship game. We have the Super Bowl coming up, and then football season will come to an end. But I wanted to talk about something that came out this week, and we're going to talk about this first. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk about the South Carolina women's basketball game and the big win they had against Vandy. Now, I tell you right now, that was what I was planning on leading the show with because I did not expect them to win by 29 points. So we pivoted, and we're going to do this. And then we're going to talk at the very end a little bit about just kind of a quirky, not change, but what they're doing with this year's preseason baseball schedule to get ready for the season and some of the stuff we've heard so far in the first couple of scrimmages. But we're starting with this. Dabo Swinney on Friday called a press conference. And I know this is a South Carolina show. I also know that is South Carolina's biggest rival. And there are few things that people in Garnet and Black hate more than Dabo Swinney. And I understand why. He is so overly annoying. I understand he's had a ton of success, but the way he runs down the hill, the golly shucks attitude he has in mostly every press conference that he has, all the stupid catchphrases, BYOG, all that crap, very easily unlikable person. But on this show, we also talk about college football as a whole and how it affects South Carolina, and we give credit where credit's due. And the portal is finally closed, but some of these NIL situations are still playing out. And I'll tell you this right now, something that I was told from a different program, not just South Carolina, because I was not told this is South Carolina. So be very clear with that. But I was told it's at a different program. And what I was told was, I was like, hey man, some of these prices and some of these deals that are being done and the amount of kids overall in the portal, it's kind of insane. Like, because here's the one thing too that is not being talked enough about. Everybody's getting something. Like whether it is $5,000 or free tuition and a little bit off the top if you're just a role player, but everyone's getting something. And there are, of course, other instances of players that are making in the millions. There's some that are probably making less than 10,000, but everyone's getting something. And one of the things that I asked about in regards to that was, well, listen, if you are paying all this like every single year, that's got to be very strenuous on the actual financial backers and the boosters. And also, like, where is this coming from? And what I was told was there's not a plan for it at some places. Like, there's a lot of promises being made, but delivering on the millions of dollars, a lot of it is, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We don't have to actually pay it until July 1st. We'll figure it out. Do not be surprised that if on July 1st you see several players from around the country, right, be in situations where they were promised something, and then when they're supposed to be paid, they weren't. Or at the start of next season. That is going to be something you will see, I promise you, because a lot of the money is being promised. It does not have to be sent just yet in most cases. And a lot of those deals are being done on the good faith that on July 1st, when the rev share agreement kicks in, you get that $20.5 million. Oh, then that'll be payday. That will not be payday for a lot of players. So that is something to monitor. But what happened with Dabo Swinney and Ole Miss was very interesting because Dabo calls his press conference. And basically what it was, listen, we something has to happen in the world of college football. And at what point do we sit here and say this is absurd? Like this is absurd. And it's not just college football, but like, if you saw this weekend, Alabama played a basketball game with a player that had left school to turn pro 2 years ago or over 2 years ago, played in the G League for 2+ years, played in a G League game last Saturday, and then was not reinstated by the NCAA. They sued, and then he got to play on Saturday against Tennessee. What are we doing? And that was Dabo Swinney's main point about Ole Miss, because at what point are there guardrails or are there consequences to the action? And Dabo Swinney came out and said, listen, Ole Miss has tampered and decided they wanted to take a run at our linebacker commit that we got, Luke Ferrelli from Cal. Luke Ferrelli had committed to Clemson. He had not signed a formal deal, which is where they left the door open a little bit for Ole Miss. But again, this is an Ole Miss program and a coaching staff and a fan base and media that has been whining and complaining about, oh my gosh, Lane Kiffin's been tampering with all of our players. This is so horrible, blah, blah. And by the way, that is horrible if that's happening. Tampering's wrong, no matter where it's at. But the fan base that was the loudest about that, it seemed, just so happened to be supporting a team that they were trying to get this kid out of Clemson, and he hadn't signed his NIL deal yet. What he had signed was like his student aid and all this kind of stuff, and had enrolled in classes. The point on Ole Miss's side, because there's like, well, we didn't do anything wrong. You guys didn't sign him to a deal yet. That's on you. Again, he had enrolled in classes. And we know that because Dabo Swinney goes to the podium, pulls out a whole thing of receipts, and says, okay, I'm going to read you the text messages of Pete Golding. You don't believe me this is happening? Let me read you the text messages from Pete Golding to our linebacker, Luke Ferrelli, who is now at Ole Miss. And at 8 a.m. in his class on a Monday, which is the worst part about the story because an 8 a.m. on Monday sucks, he is in his class and he gets a text from Pete Golding. And he says, what's the deal? Who do we need to talk to? We want you to come here. Sends him a picture of a $1 million offer, right? A photo of a $1 million contract waiting for him at Ole Miss. Ferrelli made the comment and said, listen, I'm already here. Like, I'm not, like, you have to talk to my agent, blah, blah, blah. The GM at Ole Miss contacted the agent and said, I don't want no part of this. I don't agree with it. I don't think we should do it. But this is what Pete Golding does, and he gets what he gets. Or he gets what he wants. Or does what he wants. I guess all three could probably apply in this situation now that you think about it. But that's what he said. And when he said no, then the agent fired back at Clemson and was like, well, if you don't offer this, then, or like an increase in pay, we're going to walk. Ole Miss countered with a $2 million offer. And now he's at Ole Miss. And I get Ole Miss isn't they're bending the rules, if you want to say, but tampering is breaking the rules. And the idea that this fan base, who has been the loudest one in the room, screaming and hollering about how Lane Kiffin is tampering, like, constantly, and woe is me, and this is unfair, and blah, 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 and like, just like the little engine that could mentality and energy that they had in the playoff. And then, and lo and behold, they're out here throwing money to players via text messages and sending a screenshot or a photo of a contract, offering, I mean, like, guys, not a contract. Hey, if you come here, we'll pay you this. And it's like, $100,000, over $1 million. And again, here's where I get the biggest issue is. One, it's the quote from American Gangster, fantastic movie about the loudest one in the room, which Ole Miss has been the loudest one in the room. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. And that is what we're learning about Ole Miss right now. And listen, I'm not going at Ole Miss because they, like, Kiffin was right. The way Kiffin left was horrible. It was embarrassing. But this is also bad, and it's weird that we're only like that entire collective voice was so mad about the one thing, and now it's like we didn't do anything wrong. And Dabo Swinney sits down, goes line by line, reads the entire transcript of the text, and basically, his exact quote was, I'm not going to let someone flat out tamper with my program. If you tamper with my players, I'm going to turn you in. There's a lot more I can say, but I'm going to let the NCAA do its job. I'm not trying to get anybody fired, but when is enough enough? If we have rules and tampering is a rule, then there should be a consequence for that. And shame on the adults if we're not going to hold each other accountable. And I tell you what, guys, I literally make a living off of saying sometimes how much I adamantly disagree with mostly everything this man says. But you know what? He's right. He's 1,000% right. And now the NCAA is going to investigate any credible allegations of tampering, and they expect full cooperations from all involved as is required by NCAA rules. We will not comment any further on any ongoing investigations. So they are going to actually investigate this thing with Ole Miss. And I tell you what, this is kind of a win-win for South Carolina fans because it's like, I don't think we are really big into liking most things involving Ole Miss, just the way Ole Miss has acted the past couple of years. I personally don't. I think most of the people I know that are involved in things like this with that program are not. There's a lot of things said that I don't agree with from that side of the fence. That's all I'll say. And it's a win in a situation where I hope they get in trouble for tampering. And it's not even because it's Ole Miss. It's way more because we just need guardrails. We just need guardrails to fix all this stuff, because now it's like, dude, like if you're saying he should have had this contract signed instead of his student aid signed, again, I point back to the fact that while that may be partially true and you want to convince yourself of whatever to help you sleep at night as an Ole Miss person, but also he texted him in class because he was enrolled in class. And if there's not a sign that this is so far away from student athletes than it ever has been, that's it. And it's so frustratingly bad and annoying, and it has to stop. And then the last part of it, if we're being honest, Clemson also lost a really good player. And that I don't agree with how it happened, but man, from a South Carolina standpoint, you sit back, you eat your popcorn, you watch the whole thing unfold, and you do the Jerry Seinfeld meme. It's like, that's a shame. That's tough. But all in all, thank God Dabo Swinney said something and aired out the dirty laundry from Pete Golding, because I think that might be something that we finally start to see some rules implemented. All right, that is all for the very long-winded first part of the segment, first part of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about some South Carolina sports and the big win in women's basketball, and then also just a very interesting schedule format for the South Carolina baseball team. We'll talk about all that next. South Carolina Gamecocks locked on continues right after this. All right, so before we go to break, I do want to give a shout out to our friends at FanDuel. Listen, it's the last call for football on FanDuel, which sucks, but there's one final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into parlays and plays, and stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger than the one before. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. Guys, if you're a new customer, bet $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so we're back. We're back. Before we get into the next part, I do want to tell you just real quick. You got to join the Everydayer Club. We've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks. We have multiple people, I think, now that have joined, and we appreciate all of you. We're going to continue to grow this thing. But if you have not figured out what it is yet, listen, I say this each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcasting network in America. But if you haven't already, you need to go check out the Everydayer Club. And the light. Okay, there it is. Hold on. We got lights falling over here. Well, that was fun. If you're watching on YouTube, that was a treat, I'm sure. Anyway, back to what I was saying. You get access to several cool things when you join the Everydayer Club. It's only $5 a month. You get access to ad-free audio from the Locked On audio feed on any social or on any podcasting platforms that you get your podcast from. You also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat for listeners of the show, other South Carolina fans, and we're there talking about all things from the show for South Carolina in general, and we will have that thing up and running, especially late in spring. We'll talk about some spring ball, talk about women's college basketball, and hopefully South Carolina making another deep run into the tournament, as well as baseball season. Hopefully this is not one that ends in early or late May. So join that. Check the show notes. I dropped the link in there, but go there. It's $5 a month, and it's a great time, and I hope you guys join us over there. Join the Everydayer Club. Can't say it enough. All right, women's basketball, big win. I was a little bit nervous about this. South Carolina plays Vanderbilt at home today. It was a marquee matchup. It was on ESPN, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And out of the gates, South Carolina put it on Vanderbilt. And it was a very, very good thing to see. Because after what happened at Oklahoma, where it was just like from the beginning, you kind of had a little bit of a lead at one point, but then you never were able to. It felt like you were never able to make any sort of consistent run for most of that second half. And I know they did late, obviously, because it went to overtime. They were able to tie it up. But it just was like one mistake after another. You had the ball. You had the ball. Or sorry, they had the ball with the lead. South Carolina was up by 2, and Oklahoma had the ball. And you had a chance to win that game if you get a defensive stop. You give up a 2. And it ties it with 18 seconds left, but then you still have the ball with the game tied with the last shot and a chance to go win the game on the road against a top 20 team. And what ends up happening is you don't even get a shot off, you have a turnover, and then you go into overtime and get absolutely destroyed and lose by 12. This was a big game. Vanderbilt was undefeated coming in. They were 20-0. They were leading the SEC. They were 6-0 in the SEC. It's kind of one of those weird things too, because like they're undefeated, but they were still ranked behind, I believe, Texas and South Carolina. But they came to Colonial Life, and from jump, South Carolina put it on them. It was a 33-point first quarter. It's the most points that Vanderbilt had given up all season in any quarter alone. Give them credit. It was 33-16 at the end of the first, but they came out right away. In the first minute and a half, they were up 11-2. They did not miss a lot today. They definitely didn't miss from 3 a lot. They had 12 steals. They only had 14 turnovers. They out-rebounded Vanderbilt, which was great to see after what happened last week. And then they shot 93% from the line and 59% from 3, which was obviously a big difference from what we saw the other day. It's also kind of it gives you an idea of like what went wrong at Oklahoma. It's like just so many things went wrong. And you had almost nothing happening from deep. And of course, Oklahoma's freshman is just pouring it in from long range. In this game, they were still Vanderbilt was 12 of 25 from 3. They shot at 48% from 3, and that didn't seem to matter because you still were able to win by 29 points and go. You were 10 of 17 and shot at 59%. Again, you out rebounded them, not by a crazy amount, but you did have 4 of the starters were in double digits. Medina Okot came in off the bench. She had 17, which was really good. She had 17 and 7, so it was a great game from her. Very similarly, Joyce Edwards had 16 and 7, and our girl Tessa Johnson, she had 20, including 4 of 7 from 3, which was awesome. And Tania Lotson was she had 21, which was a game high. 103 points in a 40-minute game is very, very impressive. I think what I really enjoyed the most was you come out and you go up 33-16. And then at the half, it was like 55-44. They had clawed their way back in, and it was closer than you wanted it after the big first quarter. But you come back out in the second half, and you do exactly what you did pretty much in the first quarter. You do that in the third quarter, and go. You win that quarter 27-12. And at one point, I think roughly 3 minutes into the quarter, you went from being 55-44 at the half. They're up 70-50 and up by 20 points, and it was ball game because they were off and running. Huge win. A top 5 win gives you yet another top 5 win. And now when you look at this whole thing from like a big picture standpoint, you look at it and say, okay, are there cracks in the armor? Sure. Like you lost to Texas earlier in the year. You had that loss to Oklahoma. Now that loss to Oklahoma was on the road. and you're not gonna get to play the entire tournament at home, obviously. So you're gonna have to be better in neutral environments and on the road. But the other way I look at it too is, I mean, there's just something very easily to be said that, well, maybe what happened at Oklahoma was a little bit more fluky. That's a good team. That's a good team with, keep in mind, the best player in the nation a year ago going off for 26 points against you. I don't know if that happens every time. And if it does, I love the thought that maybe Tessa Johnson hits one more three in regulation. And you don't even have to go to overtime for that to happen. So what's upcoming? A little bit of a break, thank God, because this has been a very tough stretch. You just had Texas, Oklahoma, and Vandy in 3 out of 4 games, and the 2 top 5 teams during that. You won both of those matchups. Now you get Auburn, A&M, Mississippi State, and then you hit your really tough end of the season schedule when you have your final 6 games. You have 5 ranked opponents in those final 6 games. So that is what happened in women's basketball. I do want to also say this. So baseball is underway. Like we've got some scrimmages going on. We'll have more from the weekend because they had 2 scrimmages this past weekend. And I hate to be, I'm not like fully bought in. They did bring in a really good transfer portal class. There's a couple of good arms that I think are gonna be really good. Scobie at shortstop's gonna be great. Like I there's pieces on this team that I feel good about. The other thing about it is that gives me a little bit of pause is, all right, I see these graphics every week for, all right, Arkansas has, Perfect Game comes out with their top 100 players for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. And Arkansas has like 9 in combined in all of them. I want to say South Carolina had like 1 or 3. It was one or the other. And it's just like LSU was right around like the 9 to 10 range as well. And so from a talent standpoint, in comparison to other teams in the SEC, I don't know if you're on that level. Now, the beauty of baseball is on any one given day, if you got a starter that's shoving and the bats get hot, you can beat anybody. And you saw it last year. South Carolina beat LSU last year when they were terrible. So it'll be a long season. But what's interesting to me, I don't mean long in a bad way. What's interesting to me is you're also talking about a season where, or a preseason where you have 33 days to your first practice. They're going to have, or to your first game. So from the first day of camp or classes or whatever you want to say, there's 33 days between that and your first actual official game. The plan for that is 27 days of practice, right? So you have 27 practices in those 33 days. This is the worst part of the year for baseball. Like least favorite time of the year for baseball, like every year for me. Just it's miserably cold. You're doing, all these drills and PFPs and pitcher fielding practice and then, bunt coverages and all. It's just the worst. But what South Carolina is doing, and I'm sure they're doing some of that as well, obviously, but they're taking a little bit different route than I've seen before, at least. And I trust Paul Maneri, who's obviously been one of the better coaches in college baseball in the last 20 years. They are doing 14 scrimmages in those 27 days. So half the days are just scrimmages. So if you're a baseball player, that's way better than having to go out for a 2.5-hour practice in the freezing cold. So just an interesting little setup, the way they're going about it. Thought that was kind of interesting. So that is all for today's episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to get back into more portal stuff. We're going to talk more about some of the incoming players, talking to people around the program, some sleepers, and starting to take an early look at the roster and how it's being built and developed going into the spring, so we know who's who and who's where for South Carolina coming up and all those good things. So that is all for today's episode. I hope you guys have a great day. Listen, I know the weather is really, really bad everywhere. Please be safe. Please be careful. Be good. Be good to each other. I love y'all. Go Cox.